Yes, the Las Vegas Raiders, you could say that they're betting on experience.
One-stop shop for news, views, and overreactions to all things NFL. This week we're in the AFC West, or as I like to call it, the AFC Best. So hey, we got Connor here, we got Roland,
Hello.
we've got Sean.
Hello.
Breaking news, so it just came in. Trade has happened. Darren Waller has come out of retirement. He was last playing with the Giants and retired, and has been traded from the Giants to the Dolphins. Conditional 6th round for 7th round pick swap. Darren Waller was at one stage incredibly high flying, top 5 tight end in the league when he was with the Oakland Raiders. He had a very compelling personal story. He had come back from addiction issues, was clean and playing the best football of his life. And then he left the Raiders, went to the Giants, and promptly gave up and retired.
He did have to play with Daniel Jones, to be fair.
Yes, he had to play with Daniel Jones during the worst of that Giants era. Another element is that Darren Waller is very much the 2010s tight end. So he is kind of tall, rangy. He's essentially just a giant receiver. He doesn't really like blocking, and that is a problem for the scheme that they ran in New York at the time. So we'll have to see whether or not that will work out in Miami. Obviously, look, there is a bit of a need. We've spoken in the last episode about Jonnu Smith being traded to Pittsburgh, so obviously Waller is going to be trying to slip into that spot. Well, that's all the news we have for you this week. We're going to move over to our preview of the AFC West. So first up we have the Broncos. I'll be doing these guys. So 10-7 last year. They got into the wild card. They lost against Buffalo. They got off to a very strong start and then kind of fell off a little bit from there. It was a bit of a surprise. The rookie Bo Nix kind of overperformed to what everyone was expecting, and they had a very quick turnaround and a couple of very explosive games. They haven't lost a huge amount this offseason. So Javonte Williams, the running back, is gone. Lil Jordan Humphrey, the wide receiver, and Zach Wilson, the quarterback. And then from the defensive side, they've lost Cody Barton at linebacker, Zach Cunningham at linebacker, Trey Sermon at defensive back, and punter Riley Dixon. They've added quite a lot of pieces in, though. On defensive back end, they've added the rookie Jade Barron, who we talked about in the previews. Then we've also added Tuilanga Hufanga and Sam Franklin as well. So kind of a fairly comprehensive rebuild, or a lot of new blood into that defensive backfield. At linebacker and defensive line, they've added Dre Greenlaw, Syvon Jones, the rookie, and Quay Robinson, the rookie as well. And then on the offensive side, Evan Ingram, the tight end, has come over alongside a rookie tight end in Caleb Longer. They've added J.K. Dobbins, the running back, as well as a rookie running back, R.J. Harvey, who I'm quite high on myself, Pat Bryant, the rookie wide receiver, and Trent Sherfield at wide receiver as well. So at a very high level, I think we can say expectations are quite high for the Broncos this year, particularly versus where they would have been in the previous 4 or 5 years. I think the question on everyone's lips is what we saw last year something that's sustainable? I think throughout the season, in the reviews of games and so on, we saw it come out quite a bit where we're like, is this legit? Is this going to stick, or are they going to be found out? Like we saw, they were found out in that wild card game against Buffalo. Like they kind of would fall short against some of the top player or the top teams, but overall they were quite an exciting package to watch. A lot of fun, exciting deep balls and so on. So we'll start on the offensive side and we'll say, look, can this offense look as or more explosive than it did last year? Well, Bo Nix is still in place, and if he continues to develop the way he was last year, he will be a fairly solid starter to maybe pushing up into the very good area. We'll have to see whether or not, because there's a lot of kind of holding the ball and then sending out a deep shot and having someone come down with it. So we'll see whether or not they can get to be a little bit more structured maybe, and build something a little bit more reliable and less wavy. Running back supporting cast is like, it's not hugely changed, but I do think it's going to look very different. So Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin are back again. J.K. Dobbins has come over, who's a good running back, but has injury issues. I am 100% convinced that the rookie RJ Harvey is going to take this job and run with it. He was a second round pick. I think Sean Payton kind of puts quite a value on that position, and bringing him in at that point, I think he's going to take the reins of this backfield and be the starting running back for them. And I think they're going to lean a little bit more on that with the younger legs. They can trust them a little bit more than if you remember they cycled through a huge amount of running backs with injury stuff last year. So we'll see how that goes. The wide receivers are a pretty decent bunch, if not having a massive standout. Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims are both good. You've got Evan Ingram coming in, taking over that tight end position, who maybe not hit the heights that people would have hoped for him, but is a solid set of hands. And then they got a large mishmash of different players behind there with Vele, Franklin, and so on trying to come in. Their line is overall pretty good. Garrett Bowles at the left tackle position is very strong. A decent interior. Meinhertz is in there too. Mike McGlinchey's a serviceable, if not outstanding, right tackle. Like overall, on paper, this is a good offense. It's got decently strong personnel. It's got strengths in a couple of the right places. I think that rookie is going to solidify that running back position. I would like to see maybe a more clear cut number one wide receiver, but I think the mix that you've got there and then like kind of safe over the middle hands of Evan Ingram, I would expect this offense to look pretty good this year, to be honest. I think it'll click in. They've had another year of being in the system. Sean Payton will have this stuff drilled in, so I think that'll be fine. On the defensive side, look, Vance Joseph is there. He's running a pretty decent set of guys there. They maybe don't have the pass rush that you would want traditionally from those types of defenses, but like there's not massive glaring problems anywhere. Like the defensive backfield is pretty good. As I said, they've brought in a lot of bodies in there. So there's the rookie is going to be stepping in. Pat Surtain is there. Braden Jones. Like it's fairly solid. The linebacker crew is good. Nothing to write home about as such, but like a fairly good and strong unit. Like this is kind of what I would expect a consistent wild card contender to have as a base, and then for them to grow from there upwards by if the rookie running back comes on, fantastic. That's another string to the bow. I'd like to see them kind of be looking at wide receiver maybe in the upcoming draft to add into it, to add something to just add an extra dimension into the offense. But this is very solid football being played by a very solid team with the chance to be able to push up and beyond that, because there's growth to be found in the rookie QB. There's growth to be found in this line, and then moving to different blocking schemes with the running backs and so on. Like I think this is, and it pains me to say, I think this is the best looking I've seen the Broncos in a very long time, probably since the Peyton Manning times. And they're not quite at the level that has me terrified of them or anything, but they are at the level where I'm like, man, one or two things break right for them, and they could easily beat a number of these teams. Now, are they good enough to take on the top? Like the top, I don't know. Like when you look at this team and you stack it and you go them on the road to the Bills, them on the road to Baltimore, them on the road to Kansas City. Like, would you take them in those spots? I don't think they're quite at that level yet, but equally, I didn't think that they were at a wild card level last year, and I was surprised by how quickly they came along. So, if Bo continues to develop and they can keep it running around him, and just one or two of these rookies step up and kind of become difference makers, that's Super Bowl, but sky's the limit really for them.
It is an odd world to be living in, that the Broncos are this kind of solid team that you can rely on, and you expect them to take that next step. I think they've proven last year that the Sean Payton thing, it took a few, it always showed green shoots that it was coming together, although how quickly it was coming together was always a question. But last year it finally felt that the pieces were slotting into place, that they got over the Russ Wilson stuff, and they found their franchise quarterback for the moment, and it does seem to be going in a positive direction. And you're right. I think there are things to like on both sides of the ball here. I mean, you've talked an awful lot about the potential that they have on the offensive side. I mean, I think we can't really call Bo Nix a success. I think until we see another season of this. I mean, we seen, for example, CJ Stroud gave a good example of it. There can be a sophomore kind of slump. Players, once teams kind of figure out how to deal with you, you gotta have to take your game to the next level. And maybe there are quarterbacks who don't necessarily do that. I will say I'm not 100% convinced that Bo Nix is the answer, but he is showing a lot more that I thought that he would. So the offense is solid. Maybe the receiving core, as you said, needs to be bulked up. I really like this defense. I think that this defense is the strength of this team. I think they were like top 7 last year. I mean, Pat Surtain, he's the man when it comes to the secondary. I mean, possibly the best defensive player in the NFL at the moment. I think they led the NFL in sacks last year. So there's a lot of stuff on the elite side, and you add someone like Greenlaw to that mix, and you've got a really, really solid unit. So they're a team you don't necessarily want to play on that side of the ball, and that takes a lot of pressure off your offense. If your defense is solid and can keep you in games, and indeed the Broncos were doing this during the Russell Wilson era. They were keeping their opponents to like 10, 11 points. It's just their offense couldn't score that many because of how goddamn dog shit they were. So now that they've taken that next step forward, they are a team that are going to win games. And I mean, 10-7. I mean, I have them winning 10 games, and I do think maybe their ceiling is even higher than that. If the Chiefs have a Super Bowl hangover, where they start to wobble a bit after being so thoroughly destroyed. If the Chargers under Harbaugh don't take that next step forward, there's nothing to say this Broncos team couldn't clinch the division, right? And I do think from a playoff perspective, as you talked about, you don't want this team going on the road to somewhere like Baltimore or somewhere like Buffalo and expecting to win. If the Broncos want to go deep into playoffs and really make a run with this team, I think they do have to find a way to win this division. And it's a very tough division to win. It's probably one of the toughest divisions in the NFL to win. So I have every reason to be optimistic about this team going forward. And it's very difficult to see where it's all going to fall apart unless we have something like Bo Nix regressing and the defense gets figured out a little bit or something. But these are unlikely things to happen en masse. So, yeah, Broncos are in a very good place, and it's going to be interesting to see how can they take that next step forward and how do they move from being a solid wildcard team to being a team that's talked about the same bracket as the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs, and whatever.
Yeah, like I don't disagree with you guys. I don't quite see the super upside, like where they get into the top table. Even if the Chiefs take a step back, there's more than enough firepower in the rest of the AFC to keep them in their divisional round at best for me. They're also a little bit insufferable, to be honest. Like Sean Payton has got quite insufferable as a coach. Their fans, poor me attitude. Oh, well, look how well we did. No one believed in Bo Nix. And it's like, all right, like don't get so far ahead of yourself. Like Bo Nix played well last year, and especially for a rookie, but there's still definitely weaknesses in his game. His deep ball came along decently towards the end of the season, but for most of the season, he was basically throwing like ducks up to Troy Franklin that were being dropped at a very ferocious rate. He still has a tendency, if he gets under, if the play breaks down, which isn't too often because the offensive line has definitely turned into a major strength of this team, to put the head down and just run when open plays are available. Like these are kind of quibbling a little bit because he was a rookie, but he doesn't really have the physical profile where you go, okay, this guy's going to take like the next step up. Like he's going to like turn into like, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. He just doesn't have that profile. He just feels like someone who's like, in that kind of Baker Mayfield area in terms of his career, but he's been put in a better position. So he doesn't have to play for the shitty Browns, so he'll actually probably have a solid career instead of being, thrown into the dumpster for the slightest inconvenience. And then in terms of their offseason, didn't really do much, right? Like they added some more firepower to defensive backfield by picking Barron in the first round. Hufango was picked up. We'll see if he plays. I'd be surprised if he didn't have injury concerns still, to be honest. Drake Greenlaw was the big pickup that I would have been optimistic for their defense to take even another step up to being that elite unit that you guys see. But I think he's already picked up an injury and might miss a substantial part of the season. So that puts a damper on that. And then the RJ Harvey thing, like I believe in RJ Harvey, right? Like put that on the sticker, right? We'll see, right? Like I just see the Peyton running back economics where he has like 4 different guys and they all get a certain amount of touches and fantasy managers hate it. I still see that as the most likely outcome, and it'll be fine and adequate and probably good money ball play, but not exactly the most exciting stuff. And you say Cortland Sutton's a fine starting point, but a bit like the Colts with Michael Pittman, it's just not gonna. You don't feel like you're taking the next step to being an elite offense with that. And then the defense, I think, is very good. And I think Vance Joseph is someone I'm happy to get behind and say well done to you for kind of turning things around and kind of showing why you're a great coach. And there's great players like Pat Surtain and players like that there. And so I think the defense is definitely going to be a good unit. If it's going to turn into like, those kind of elite Ravens type units where they can win a Super Bowl based off that alone, we'll see. But with a good offensive line and a good defense, they're going to be good. But Broncos fans, like, I get it. Like, it's been a few years since you won a Super Bowl for you. We're like 10 years. Most teams would be very, very glad to have it. I get you have to live with the Chiefs, so it's a bit annoying to have that happening at the same time. But, get over yourself a little bit. Like, you're good. You should be happy. Not everyone has to be like converted to the Church of Bo for you to be respected. And Sean Payton can just go fuck himself. Like, he deserved to be played by Kevin James. Let's be frank.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's fun to have like other people on board, albeit for like previously it was just divisional reasons and their fans being pricks, whereas now it's like no, just in general their coaching staff are all pricks.
There'll be a thorn in the side for you, but I don't know if they're going to be anything more than that.
Yeah, I've got them going 9-8, which is good enough for 6th in the AFC, and they go out in the wildcard round.
9-8 for me, 7 wildcard exit.
10-7 for me, which only gets them 7th seed. Wildcard, lose to the Bills.
Very good. Next, we turn to the Los Angeles Superchargers. Sean, they went 11-6 last year. Wildcard loss to Houston, who we talked about last week. Tell us how they've changed and how you think this season is shaping up for them.
Yeah, when we were doling out the AFC West, I wanted the Chargers because I think they're the most interesting team in the AFC to talk about and to think about. Maybe except for the Bengals, who have a similar thing, which the question is just, how good are they? What is their ceiling? What is their floor? Because I've always been a big Jim Harbaugh guy, even going back to his 49ers days. And I was always confident he would come into the Chargers and he would turn them into a good team. And he did turn them into a good team. But the worry is always that he's just going to run up against the fundamental Chargerness of this franchise. And we saw that in the playoffs where this really good team goes on the road into a very winnable wildcard game in Houston and comprehensively shits the bed. Justin Herbert has a nightmare. The team just is never competitive on either side of the ball. Well, a little bit. The defense keeps them in it for a little bit, but falls apart in the second half. And it's suddenly now it's like, is this it? Are the Chargers just in the same way the Bengals maybe are? They're just, trapped by their fundamental nature that they will never be a good team because they're the Chargers. So it's interesting to see, I think, how that next step happens. And I think this season we're going to see a little more what Jim Harbaugh wants from this team, especially on the offensive side, and maybe how that team is going to evolve going forward. So the big kind of additions were on the running back side. Najee Harris brought in and Omari and Hamilton drafted. I think they're going to try and do a 1-2 combo there, which could be very interesting to watch. Wide receivers, Mike Williams is back. Trey Harris, the rookie, brought in. Keandre Lambert-Smith, rookie. Trey Lance brought in a quarterback, although I don't expect to see him. Offensive line, Mekhi Becton, Andre James, Branson Taylor, the rookie. Tight end, Tyler Conklin. Tight end, Arondo Gatson, the rookie. On the defensive side, Dante Jackson, Benjamin St-Juste, RJ Mickens, the rookie. Kyle Leonard, the rookie. Deshaun Hand, Jamari Caldwell, Deshaun Phillips. Who they've lost on the defensive side? I mean, the big one would be Joey Bosa, and he's going to be an interesting one to replace, although you could argue Eli Apple is as big a loss, although I wouldn't have that same opinion. On the offensive side, they got rid of Dobbins and Edwards, but have obviously tried to move forward. The loss of DJ Chark and felt all that strongly. So, I mean, the big question is how does this offense look going forward? And the big focus, I think, is going to be on the run game. We know that Jim Harbaugh likes to run the ball, and we know that he wants that kind of hard-nosed run game, and now he seems to really be leaning into it, and he seems to have found what he wants. He wants Najee Harris to 1,000 yards every season that he's been in the league for Pittsburgh, as the guy for now, and then Hampton comes in the long term to be the lead back going forward. I think they're different enough. I mean, Harris is your kind of between the tackles guy who will grind out 3 or 4 yards a go, whereas Hampton has explosive. That I think there's actually a 1-2 punch kind of thing, like the Lions had at certain points in the last few seasons. It'll be interesting to see how that balances, and fantasy football owners are going to be tearing their head out about which one gets more touches in every game. I mean, a lot of it will depend about how much this new offensive line, a lot of changes on the offensive line, how that gels together to protect them. But I mean, they will probably, they could, if it works, they could average 100, 110 yards a game between them, maybe even more. So this Chargers will be a run-heavy first team, and I think that's what Harbaugh wants, and I think he's leaning into it, and I think he's got the personnel to do that. So I would expect that to work. And having a solid run game always gives you a solid base to kind of work off. You know you will get a certain amount of yards every game. You know you will be able to score points. You know you'll be able to grind down the clock if it comes to it. So it really fits into what Harbaugh wants to do. He wants to control games and squeeze the life out of them. The big kind of X factor, and has always been the big question mark over the Chargers in the Jim Harbaugh era, is what the hell is Justin Herbert's role, right? Like is he to be, an incredibly talented player who's kind of compressed into, cameos, basically, explosive cameos, something to kind of play off the running backs as the reliable option. And then we saw in the playoffs last year that maybe he doesn't quite have what it takes to compete at the highest level, or he hasn't yet proven that he's able to be in the Allen, Mahomes, Burrow tier of top-level AFC quarterbacks. There was a lot of reliance on Ladd McConkey, and obviously the bringing in of these new wide receivers, bringing back Mike Williams is an attempt to rectify that. I think that will solve some problems. They won't necessarily. They'll have more options. They'll be able to stretch the field a little bit, I think. And that will open things up. And if the run game gets kind of established, that does open up options in terms of play action and what they can do offensively as kind of surprise package. That if you're not expecting the passing game from the Chargers, that makes someone like Herbert a really interesting weapon, because he can open up a game with one throw. So that's good. I mean, I think it makes them less predictable, which is always good on the offensive side. I think we're getting greater diversity, greater yardage. Big question about red zone efficiency, I think, and how that will work. But I think the running game kind of adds to that. So I think offensively, this team, it's looking pretty sweet. If it all comes together, this team is gonna fire offensively. I suppose the less fun aspect is the defense. The loss of Bosa not necessarily being replaced. The Chargers, I mean, they have some talent there, Derwin James, Khalil Mack, and such like, but they also have a lot of areas where they're quite weak. The secondary, or at least the cornerbacks in particular, have weaknesses. And the Chargers, I mean, they've spent the last 5 years having really terrible defenses. So this was this thing that they were going to get. So it's all about, what can they get out of it in terms of a scheme? What can Jesse Minter, who we have a lot of time for as a coach, what can he pull out of this? I mean, what's coming out of camp is a lot of things based on fit, light box runs, versatility, discipline. He's simplifying roles. He wants to focus on how to maximize the talents like Mack, Derwin James, Henley. There's a strong belief that Minter has what it takes as a tactical coach to bring this team to the next level. It's not going to be as exciting or as explosive as the offense. It doesn't have as high a ceiling, I think, as the offense have, and you would worry if you get into a playoff situation that even if the offense is clicking, does the defense have what it takes to really shut down an elite AFC offense? And that question is still unanswered. So I'm quite optimistic about this Chargers team. I think I'm a little bit out on the edge by this. I think both of you guys maybe are a little bit less up on year two of this operation, but I can really see the pieces coming into place. I can really see this team building on it. The real question is, can they do it in the playoffs, and can Justin Herbert step up when he needs to? And if the answers to those two questions are yes, then the Chargers are going to be a really difficult team to play this year.
Like, I like the Chargers. I think they will be good this year. I think there's just a really tough schedule for the AFC West as a whole, but within division and without. And I do think they'll be, as you say, a tough team to play. And if they do miss in the playoffs, I imagine it'll be by very, very close margins. That's what I have. Spoiler alert. They're just missing out to the Broncos despite the same record. And when I look at what they've done this season, I have very little to quibble with in terms of this being bad moves. I think they obviously took over Harbaugh and co. a very rough roster, and they've in 2 seasons turned it into a much better looking roster. I think I'm not a huge fan of Najee Harris move. I would much rather, if they just drafted Marion Hampton and he was now their RB1, I'd be more excited about the team rather than having to deal with the fact that Najee Harris will inevitably have like 200 touches that go for, an average of exactly 4 yards. But that is something that is valuable in the NFL. I understand that. I don't like it, but I understand it. And then, obviously, as you said, Lan McConkey emerged as being their number one wide receiver, but they brought in some help. Like Mike Williams is a good contested catch guy. Trey Harris was drafted in the second round, I believe, so has an opportunity to be the second receiver either. They have a couple of other guys behind that. I think the burden on McConkey should be less this season than it was at the end of last season, and that can only help with Justin Herbert. And I think, it's a bit weird to have Justin Herbert to have this, whatever you like. I think whatever you think about how has he evolved to the player we thought of it based on how he plays a rookie, I think, you see the athletic talent is there. You see there is upside there that if tapped into could turn him into someone at the same level of the Mahomes and the Josh Allens. He hasn't quite reached that, but he has that potential. And to just treat him as put him in the garage, bring out in case of emergency, does that feel appropriate? Not really, but it's what they're choosing to do. And then, they bring in Mekhi Becton, who obviously, turned his career around with the Eagles. Obviously, you'd worry what'll happen after leaving the Eagles, but he fits what they want, right? He's a big motherfucker who's going to move people in the run game, and that can only help them there. I'd have a worry still about their interior offensive linemen overall. Outside of that, they're still going to maybe rely on guys like Bradley Bozeman or Zion Johnson or rookie or Andre James, but, given that they have the two franchise tackles there already in Slater and Alt ready to go, and those guys both looked really good last year, Slater obviously some concerns over health there, it just feels like they're going to be fine. Even someone like Tyler Conklin is very much a good, solid, good at blocking, decent catch, just feels very Harbaugh, for lack of a better term. And the only thing that makes me say that this isn't going to turn into a great offense is that it's still Greg Roman, so the pass concepts are probably still going to be basic bitch concepts, and his run game will be really good. But if you want to compete at the top table, if they want to be saying we're going to beat out the Chiefs, or even that we should be considered above the Broncos in this division, I'm a little bit still skeptical that Greg Roman experience will run out of tread before the Harbaugh experience runs out. We'll see. And on the defense, it's very much still Khalil Mack, older, hope it works out. Hope Jesse Minter, who's very highly thought about in NFL circles, can just squeeze the stuff out of here. And there are players who stepped up, like Tarheeb Steele last year. Diane Henley played quite well. But there are concerns at the second pass rusher position in the defensive backfield. But, I saw enough last year to believe the defense is going to turn into a huge liability. So, yeah, for the Chargers, I could definitely go higher than what I have been predicted. But they just, this feels like a team that could have the potential to take over the NFL or join that top table and really kick up a stink. Instead, they've done the more responsible thing, made some smart moves, move into year two, get a little bit better, hopefully make more progress, make the playoffs again, maybe even win a playoff game. But they didn't make the kind of superstar moves that made me go, okay, now this whole thing is going to turn into a juggernaut that the rest of the AFC is going to fear week to week. I think everyone will be annoyed about them and everyone will not want to play them, but will they fear them? I don't still see that yet.
Yeah. I think they'll be good. I think they'll be pushing in and trying to fight for a wild card spot kind of level. That's roughly where I see them. I'm less high on the Jim Harbaugh stuff, but I think it's just I'm still not entirely clear on what he wants out of this team. Is the thing. I get the big linemen and getting the run game. I'd say Marion Hampton will be leading this backfield by halfway through the year anyway. They've only given a 1 year deal to Harris, and it's only $5 million. So I would imagine if Hampton looks better, and I think he will, because I think Najee Harris was a product of a good line and a lot of touches rather than anything else. I
hope you're right, but Marion Hampton's going to do a slightly inefficient run and get tackled for a loss. He's back to Najee Harris for 3 yards.
But this is it. This is my problem with the Jim Harbaugh experience. Is that's because that's what we expect out of that coach, and I'm just not sure of if his direction is I want to have a winning team right now in the NFL, or I want to essentially run a grown-up version of my college program and I'll put manners on him. It's some of it just doesn't line up perfectly for me. But yeah, look, good team. I agree with a lot of the analysis Sean had. Like I said, I think Hampton should take over that backfield and Najee be the two instead of being the one. I think they haven't solved the problem of a second receiver unless one of the rookies steps up, because I don't think bringing Mike Williams back is the answer. I don't think he did fantastically well outside of it. I don't think he was doing fantastically well inside of it. I think he's just a bit gone. Quentin Johnson doesn't excite me. The tight ends are fine, but yeah, it's just kind of a bit of the same. And then on the defensive side, again, Khalil Mack, at this stage, is he the difference maker for you? You've got him, you got Derwin James, and that's it. Like everything else is like spit, dreams, sellotape, and hope. That's all it is. And the problem is in this division, and as you said, Ronan, with who they play out of division this year, it's a tough line against an awful lot of teams with good quarterbacks and good deep root receivers or deep developing stuff. And like Dante Jackson and Cam Hart aren't filling me with fear. Derwin James is still good, but he's not as good as he used to be. Like he's still useful, but he's not going to be keeping toe to toe with some of the guys that they're going to be coming up against. So I just think that they're not quite there. If it breaks right, yeah, like I think what they've done this year more so than push their way into being contenders, I think what they've done is they've raised their floor a bit. So I think the days are gone of seeing the kind of like 4-win, 5-win Chargers team where they're just kind of looking around and a series, Lemony Snicket style series of unfortunate events is why they're there. I think they're going to win 8 or 9 games this year. I think they're going to be solid, but I don't see, unless they let the rookie take over the backfield and they really lean into that and they actually start using Justin Herbert. Like that's the other thing. If you start using him a little bit more dynamically, then we're down a score and a half. I guess we'll just throw the ball at Lab McConkey. Like I just need to see that for them to push beyond that. But for now, I just view them as guys in the hunt who aren't getting out of the hunt. Maybe they get a playoff berth and they get picked off immediately because yeah, I'm not seeing the thing that pushes them over the edge. But I do think that they've built a level and maybe that's it. They're building up to this level and then next year they push on beyond it. So I've got them going 8-9 anyway.
Yeah, 9-8 for me, just missing out in the playoffs. But yeah, as I say, if they sneaked into the wild card, it wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah, I'm going big. Well, not that big. 11-6, fifth seed. I have them winning a playoff game in Houston and then falling to the Bills in the divisional.
Okay, Ronan, on to the Las Vegas Raiders. They had a 4-13 season last year. Not great, but a lot of change and some of it quite familiar to yourself.
Yes, the Las Vegas Raiders, you could say that they're betting on experience. Yeah, so obviously they made some, there's the cough. But look, this is a big move for them. They obviously come off the Antonio Pierce era, which was a bit of a disaster, let's be frank, and they go, and Tom Brady apparently goes, let's just get someone that I know can get the job done. Let's make this team respectable. And so they go out for the rootin' tootin' chewing gum chewing Pete Carroll, and they bring in, surprisingly, Chip Kelly, who's obviously, changed a lot. Everyone's saying he's not the Chip Kelly you remember from his Eagles tenure or from Oregon. He's now a much more mature man. He doesn't just immediately snap the ball as soon as the ball is put down.
He's been to Europe. He's now called Crisp Kelly.
Yeah, so... And it's all different. And of course, Pete Carroll's like, this quarterback situation just doesn't work for me. Like, AOC sounds like a liberal to me. Gardner Minshew, cool, but not what I'm looking for. And he's like, I'm going to ring up my old gang in Seattle and see if they want to get rid of Geno Smith. And Geno Smith was willing and able, and the Seattle Seahawks were willing and able to trade him away for not that much. I think it was like a 3rd-round pick. And Geno Smith takes a relatively good contract, but still middle of the road if you look at starter quarterback money. And they go, we got our guy. We got him. And they're going to go, let's go Raiders. And then they go into the draft and they feel like they've kind of made enough moves in free agency. They got a backup running back, Raheem Mostert. They've added some offensive line depth in Alex Kappa. And they go, let's pick the most dynamic running back of the last 3 or 4 seasons in Ashton Genty, and let's see if we can turn this into a rootin' tootin' running the ball game. And basically, Pete Carroll's time seems to have come back. The NFL's all about running the ball, all about tough defense, and Pete Carroll's going, God damn, that's exactly how I love to play football, so let's make this work. And then they have a really big draft class. They draft some additional wide receivers in Jack Beck and Dante Thornton. And Jack Beck, apparently good receiver, but also a great blocker, got a lot of attitude, someone that you can build around. And, they add some offensive line talent in Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant to hopefully buffer that up after letting a few veterans go, like Andre James and Andrews Pete and Cody Whitehair. And they're going, this is looking interesting. And of course, let's not forget that despite how much of a disaster last year was, that their 1st-round pick was certainly not a disaster. Brock Bowers, which still is a great name for a tight end, was amazing. possibly the best tight end last year. Depends who you talk to, but like definitely should be up there in the top 2 at least. And you already have your tight end there. We know Geno Smith knows how to work with a tight end. The offensive line has questions, but they have some solid players like Colton Miller and Darlin Parham. I think Jackson Powers-Johnson, they'd hope will make a second-year leap at the center position. And they're kind of like, okay, we got something there in offense. Let's get this offense from being like poop into like troops, and let's get marching all over the rest of this AFC and show them what real football is all about. And on the defense, it's like the classic Pete Carroll formula. All change is good change. Like, you know, some overpaid or overhyped veterans like Trevor Merrick or Nate Hobbs or Marcus Epps or Robert Spillane or Jack Jones or Devan Diablo. These aren't serious guys. These aren't guys who are into the Pete Carroll experience where it's all about enthusiasm and getting right up there. And so you bring in his own guys like Jeremy Chin and Eric Stokes and Darian Porter and Jermaine Pat and Landon Roberts and Lecky Foden. And they're just like, this is a team that's like when Pete Carroll came into Seattle, the first thing that he did is just rip up the roster and just churn it around. So all the changes that we've seen in this offseason already, expect that to keep going all the way through the season. The only difference now is, of course, that like when Pete Carroll was the head coach of Seattle, like he was a man in his like late 50s, I think. Whereas now he's like in his 70s, I think. So, you know, a lot less time to get things going. So I think that's reflected in how they're choosing to be even more aggressive than you would expect. Like drafting a running back high up in the draft is not the move of a team that thinks, oh, we're trying to be respectable. That's a move of a team that thinks, no, we're actually going to go in there and kick ass of the best division in football, and no one's going to tell us that we can't do that. And so, you know, like Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, we know it works. I'm not sure what the compatibility with Chip Kelly is, but Chip Kelly obviously has rehabilitated his image in the college game, was the OC of Ohio State, I believe, last year, where they were very good, and apparently has kind of combined NFL sensibilities in terms of play calling and how to structure a game plan, but still has a, you know, wide Rolodex of kind of weird college magic bullshit type plays that should hopefully get the hearts pumping among the Vegas faithful, of which there isn't a huge amount. It's more of a tourist attraction than anything else, this team. And in Geno Smith, you have a quarterback who's more than able to execute a plan. The problem is last year that the offensive line was so bad that he effectively, the worst parts of his game came out again and again and again. You saw some red zone turnovers that were horrible to see, but that was on a Seattle team that couldn't run the ball up the middle for love nor money, especially on short distance and down, where he was getting pressured nearly instantaneously on certain snaps. And if the Raiders offensive line can just be middling, I think you'll see something much closer to the Geno Smith we saw in his first year in Seattle, where he was like carrying the ball around. I think this is a team that isn't going to go as pass heavy as Seattle were last year anyway. So I think, you know, run the ball with Ashton Genty, get this rookie going, feed this guy, get that thing going, then get Geno Smith involved with their pass catchers who are, you know, obviously kind of centered around Brock Bowers, but you have Jacoby Myers, you have rookies here who hopefully can step up, and then hope this offensive line can be solid. And on the defense, you know, hope that it works out, right? Like Patrick Graham is the one kind of main name that was retained from the previous era. You obviously still have Max Crosby, who every offseason is weird for Max Crosby because basically like, you're underpaid. Here's like $5 million extra. Just don't get unhappy, please. But outside of that, obviously they hope to get a bounce back from Christian Wilkins, who was a bit of a free agent bust, but he's obviously quite a talented player. Malcolm Kuntz, they decided to re-up, had some injury issues, but when he's played, looked like he could potentially be a suitable backup for Max Crosby on the other side. And then they add in veterans like Jermaine Pratt, who was dropped by the Bengals. They pick up Jermaine Chin. I still have huge questions about their defensive backfield because you have like Darnay Holmes, Ja'Cory Bennett, Eric Stokes, and Darian Porter as a rookie. Like, it's very questionable there. But if there's one thing that Pete Carroll was always good at, it was coaching up young defensive back talent. He has a very specific scheme, and obviously he had great success, especially early on in his career with Seattle, and people like Richard Sherman. So I think that's the one thing where I go, I don't think it's going to be like amazing, but I do think there's a case where even though the talent doesn't fill me much hope, I think with Pete Carroll there, he will turn this into a better than expected unit despite the lack of name brand talent there. And with Max Crosby at the front, you always know you're going to get some degree of pressure as long as he's on the field. So yeah, the Raiders, yeah, like I think they see themselves as better than they are. Like I think Pete Carroll always thinks that way. I don't think Pete Carroll's capable of thinking except that we're going to win the Super Bowl every single year. But if I look at the reality of the roster and what was left there after the disaster that's been the Raiders for the last 5 years, the last 10 years, let's be frank, in terms of awful drafts and lots of questionable free agency pickups and all that kind of stuff and what he's had to build around. If I look at this roster, I can't really see it going beyond being like a solid mid-level roster and in a really tough division. But because I've seen Pete Carroll basically create miracles with very threadbare Seattle rosters in the back, I'm going to make the backing that they're going to be a little bit better than some people might expect despite the level of competition, but still probably not good enough to be at the top table and genuinely fighting for those playoff positions or into the playoffs. But if they're still relevant coming into like mid-December, late December, that'll be considered a major leap up for a team that's obviously been so much in the doldrums for so many years now.
Yeah, like this is a spot where this roster has needed a serious turnaround for a bit, and they've now got a guy in place who has the vision and the power within the organization to do it. So I think that's a positive. I think the quarterback play will be improved on last year with Geno being there. Brock Bowers is a great weapon. I'm excited about the rookie Genty. The less said about the wide receiver core, maybe the better. But like this is success for the Raiders for the season. It feels almost like when we were chatting about what success looks like for Carolina last year. Like what it is there's a lot of medicine that needs to be taken in rebuilding this. And like, don't fool yourselves, Raiders fans, just because you've taken the superstar running back and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is a rebuild, and this is maybe not a 4-year time horizon rebuild. This is a 2 or 3 get things turned around as quick as you can. So I would expect to see more transactions here. I would expect them to run through a lot of free agents and a lot of tryouts and rookies because, like you said, Ronan, Pete Carroll is good at finding raw defensive back talent and coaching it up. That's a big point of weakness on their defense. So they'll be able to find some people there, but it might not be a year one impact. They've got the kind of pressure coming from the front that allows you to have a little bit less in your defensive backfield because the guys will have less time to throw anyway. But like this is a combing over and then recombing over and then recombing over and trying to find people in positions. I would expect them to be picking up wide receivers off teams that are cutting them whenever it comes to roster cutdowns and things like that. I expect them to be on the waivers staring at people who are coming off rosters. Um, and what I do think for certain is I think the Raiders are going to be a far more exciting watch this year. I think they're going to be competent, if not like explosive, or terrifying. But I think they're going to be well coached. They've got enough talent at positions that you can't just take the week off, which was for the last couple of years often what people were doing when it was coming to Raiders time. They're saying, great, it's essentially a bye week, or great, it's a relatively irrelevant game. I think they're going to make people earn it a little bit more. I still don't think they're going to do phenomenally. I think it's going to be better than last year. But I would say look at the positives of what's happening and understand this is a 2 or 3 year turnaround. And this is only year one. And I think the tone of the conversation we'll be having about the Raiders this time next year will be very different.
Look, I have a lot of time for Pete Carroll. You know, in his heyday, he was one of the best coaches out there. I have I have a good bit of time for Geno Smith. I mean, a man who was basically chalked off but managed to rebuild his career as a QB1 in the NFL. That's not a thing that happens every day. I'm excited about Ashton Genty and what he can bring to the league, but this Raiders team is very, very deficient on talent, even with all those pieces. They're in possibly the hardest division, maybe the second hardest division in the entire league. Pete Carroll is old, and maybe in his later years in Seahawks wasn't quite weaving the magic that he had earlier on. I find it difficult to locate where I should be excited about this team. It's the most diplomatic way I can say it. I think they, especially on the defensive side, have massive talent deficiencies. I mean, they've spent years being like, well, as long as we have Max Crosby, that's all we need for a defense. Everyone else can just slot into places, and we've seen that it's just not enough. It's not enough to have one really, really good defensive player and to not put enough effort into the pieces around that player. And my heart does go out to Max Crosby because he's incredible, but he's been playing for dog shit teams for a very long time, and you'd almost wish that he, just got sufficiently fed up one year that he went off to, sign for the Ravens or something and won a championship.
He was close before Pete Carroll came in. I think that settled him down.
Yeah.
But he was agitating for getting out of there before he was happy with the Tom Brady, Pete Carroll situation.
Yeah. I mean, I think if the Raiders were in, say, the AFC South, I would be optimistic about these changes and what they mean for their competitiveness in that division. They probably would have a decent chance of competing to win the AFC South Division. But in this, the AFC West, they're comfortably the fourth best team, and these changes aren't enough to excite me to believe that anything's going to change with that. And I think if this is a rebuild, I think we're still 2 or 3 years away from this rebuild making them competitive in this division, never mind in the league as a whole. I still think that there's significant weaknesses here that have not been fixed, and I don't think a 70-year-old head coach is the magic sponge solution that is going to cure all evils.
Stop being so ageist, Sean.
With I spent many years cheering on a 70-year-old coach to be better than.
And look at him now out there dating 20-year-olds.
You too, Pete Carroll, if you really want to, can destroy
Pete
your
Carroll
life.
doesn't date 20-year-olds, he dates football. He loves football.
Yeah, I mean, this team, as we say, shouldn't really exist. It exists to give away fans a holiday, and they will continue to do that. And I don't think they're going to be super competitive, at least for 2 or 3 years.
Well, I've got them winning 6 games, 6-11.
Yeah, 8 and 9 for me. As I said, there are scenarios where they have a more upside, but as I said, like the roster deficiencies compared to the very stacked division they're in probably means I have to have them a little smidge below where the rest of the division is.
5 wins, 14th best team in the AFC. Yeah.
No, seems relatively same garages here anyway. And finally on to the Chiefs. 15-2 last season, had quite a significant loss in the Super Bowl to Philadelphia that had a bit of lipstick smeared on it. So big changes this offseason. They traded away offensive lineman Joe Tootie and got rid of DJ Humphries. From the defensive side, Justin Reed is gone, Tershawn Wharton, Derek Natty, and Josh Uche. They then also from the skill position side lost DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Watson, Mecole Hardman, Sam J. Pirine, and Carson Wentz, the backup quarterback, who they've brought in instead. So they've got the rookie Josh Simmons on the offensive line. He was the first round rookie. Came in with an injury from last year, but apparently he's good to go fully in training camp, which is positive signs, but we'll see whether or not the plan is to let him compete for that starting job or to hold him out for a bit. Jalen Moore they picked up in trade as well, so he's kind of penciled in to be starting on that left-hand side. On the defense, they added Christian Fulton, Mike Edwards to the backfield, and Noah Williams. The rookie defensive line, they added Norman Lott, Gillot, Ashton Gillot, and Jerry Tillery. And on the skill positions, Jalen Royals, the rookie, Eli Mitchell, running back, Brashad Smith, rookie running back, and quarterback Gardner Minshew, who I, on this very podcast for 2 or 3 years, have said that's the backup I would want. So I'm very happy with Gardner Minshew getting in there. But yeah, this was it was a tough season last year for the Chiefs. Obviously, look, it went well. They got to the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff, but offensive line kind of dogged them for the entirety of the year. By the end of it, you had the guard Tooney out playing left tackle, not even the backup guard, but now the backup to the backup guard playing to the backup tackle playing inside in place of him, and they kind of got exposed quite badly against Philadelphia in that Super Bowl. They just weren't able to stop the pass rush at all. They got kind of destroyed. So obviously the last time that happened, they rebuilt the offensive line and everything went great. They haven't really been able to achieve the exact same amount of rebuild this time around. Obviously the contracts and so on are going to cause a problem, but as it stands, you've got either Jalen Moore, who they traded for, or the rookie Josh Simmons is going to start out at left tackle, so we'll see what happens there. Mike Caliendo and Kingsley Sumiatia is going to be competing for the left guard. So we saw Caliendo a bit last year and he didn't massively impressed. So Sumataya is the chap who's expected to win that position, but there's question marks over why, if that was the case, was he not being put in there last year. Creed Humphreys is locked down at centre, Trey Smith at the right guard position, and Juwan Taylor, the decent defensive stats, terrible penalty stats, right tackle of the year on the right side. So like the line is It's not fixed, I would say, but I think it's in an okay position, and it's just going to depend quite a lot on how the left tackle position develops out for them. In terms of weapons, look, Pat Mahomes is there, so you're always pretty good with that. Pacheco is the lead running back coming in, although he was still a little bit slow coming off that injury last year. So we'll see whether or not there'll be a bit of a push behind him. I think there's two or three people trying to fight their way in that room. Rashee Rice should be back from the injury and take over WR1. He was fantastic at the end of his first year and then was out from pretty much the start of the second year. But we'll see, there's kind of an asterisk there as well because he has outstanding questions legally following the car crash incident a year and a half ago.
I believe right now is that will get pushed to next season. If that
Yeah,
manifests
I
as
believe
suspension.
at least next season because I think the NFL statement on it was they're going to wait until any court cases have happened and those are not moving quickly. Xavier Worthy,
Ironic.
yeah. Xavier Worthy came on very strong last year, and kind of speedstery type, but was doing more and more as the season pushed on. So that's quite nice. Hollywood Brown is there as kind of the third receiver. Kelsey was slower last year. He has slimmed down, but that's just an off-season trope. So I'd imagine that we'll see less focus on Travis Kelsey this year, with an idea of holding him a little bit more towards the playoffs or whatever. Noah Gray stepped up well behind him though, so we'll see whether we see a little bit more of Gray or if anyone else slips in. The only other one to maybe keep an eye on is the rookie Jalen Royals. Has been getting good pop coming out of camp, but that's about it. So like I would say, looking at this offense, the line is at TBD because we need to see what that left hand side looks like. My guess now would be the starting line will be Moore and Sumataya on that side, but we'll see if that works. A and B if it continues longer term or whether they'll work Josh Simmons in. I think this might be if Rice is back from that injury properly, this is one of the best groups of wide receivers Mahomes has had. So that would be very exciting to see. But again, it has to see whether or not that injury is going to slow down Rice at all, or whether he'll come back hitting the ground running. So that's quite promising from my perspective as a fan. Anyway, on the defensive side, Karlaftis came on strong last year and is playing well. Chris Jones is, I think, kind of coming towards the tail end. He's still very good and he's still kind of like right up there, but I think he's maybe kind of just hit the flatter starting into the downslope would be my guess. So I'd keep an eye on Chris Jones to see what his performance is like this year. Pinnell and Dana fill out the rest of the line, although there's a rookie in there, Norman Lott, to try and push in, and Charles
Chiefs
Omenihu.
fans are pretty high in the Norman Lott pick.
Yeah, no, he looks good, and the reports at a camp are good. But I always say, particularly with defensive linemen, like you can't really tell with the camp stuff that happens at this stage of the year. You need to see full contact to get a good handle on it. The linebacker core is fine, but maybe not as strong as it has been. Drew Tranquil has proved a cheap replacement in there for Gay. Bolton's still playing quite well, and you've got kind of a mixture of Fulton, Chanel, and there's also a rookie called Williams who are pushing to that third spot. Defensive backfield is okay, I would say at best. I think we are pretty good at cornerback. We have some question marks at safety. So McDuffie is playing at a good level. Watson played pretty well, and then Brian Cook was up and down. He had good games, bad games. Jaden Hicks, Chamari Connor be the same. So it's kind of, it's a bit mixed. We'll see whether or not we'll be able to have Spags dream something up or find kind of new ways to use them, because I think maybe just at the safety spot we're going to be a little bit weak, but that's always the necessity when you're paying a couple of the top end players that they are at the moment. Obviously coaching remains pretty much the same with Andy there, Spags there, Matt Nagy there, albeit that I think Matt Nagy should not be there anymore, and they should have someone a bit younger in there instead, and someone with some backbone who can actually direct things a little bit more. I don't think he really has the ear of the players a huge amount, to be honest. But overall, strong position. I have the same concerns I did at the end of the year about the line, because we just need to see it in contact and see what happens. I think the defense is looking good to maybe slightly improved in the front end, maybe a little bit worse off in the back end. And in terms of the offense itself, if the line was to be fine, this is a more explosive collection of pass catchers than we've had in a very long time, caveated with we'll probably have to de-emphasize the tight end position a little bit, or just see Noah Fant to take a good chunk more of the snaps there. But I would be quite positive coming into this year. I would expect, like, we probably won't win 15 games again because I don't think that's really standard. And I think we played an awful lot of close games. I think if the offense gets firing, will be a bit more dynamic and exciting. Maybe not back to the 50 touchdowns, 5,000 yards stuff, but I think a little bit more dynamic than it has been in the last year or two. And if not, I just think, again, fire Matt Nagy. But yeah, no, I'm feeling pretty good coming into this. I don't know if they've done enough to be able to overcome if they came up against Philadelphia again, because that essentially comes down to the line, and the line is very hard to judge in June, July.
I like this roster still. I mean, I think there might be a worry. I mean, maybe Chiefs fans have it. Maybe general fans are thinking about it, a kind of an end of the dance kind of thing. That the Super Bowl loss was such a harrowing moment that people think, is this the end of the dynasty? But you look at the roster and you look at the coaching and you think there's still enough pieces here to be as good as they were before. It's still the Chiefs. It's still Mahomes. It's still Andy Reid. That receiving core, that general skill player, I mean, Pacheco, Rice, Worthy, Kelsey, Hollywood Brown, that's a very strong skill position core to be bringing into any fight. And when you've got on the defensive side a lot of talent plus a really good DC, there's no reason to think this team isn't going to win a lot of games. What's interesting to me, I think, is what the Chiefs are going to be facing, perhaps the biggest challenge, schedule. I mean, Ronan's already talked about the fact the AFC West has got a pretty tough schedule. They're paired with the NFC East, for example. The Chiefs just have an awful lot of tough games. They're playing the Chargers twice and Broncos twice, obviously. They've also got games against the Eagles, the Ravens, the Lions, the Bills, the Commanders, the Texans. And a lot of these are front-loaded. I mean, I think the first half of their season is going to be a real slog. And if they can get to week 9 with, say, 7 or 8 wins, I think this team's going to win a lot of games. I think if they get over those first 6 weeks, I think they have the Chargers, Eagles, Ravens, and Lions in the first 6 weeks. So they could easily be 2-4 by the end of week 6. But if they're like 4-2, 5-1, then we know this is going to be a good year, because the second half of their season, things ease out a bit, and the Chiefs always get into their groove come November, December. So maybe the Chiefs can't really afford the kind of slow starts we've seen them have a few times in the Mahomes era, where they don't really get going until November or so. But if they can get through that initial slog of games, maybe get revenge against the Eagles, keep the Chargers in their place, I think they're in a really good spot then to hold on to the number 1 seed and such like. I mean, the big question will be the playoffs, right? When they start to face, they're probably going to have to beat 2 at least of the Ravens, Bills, Bengals to win. And then they're probably, if they get to the Super Bowl, I mean, it's hard to see. If it's not the Eagles, it might be the Lions. But, there's no easy games in the Super Bowl. That's when the real test is down. That's when we'll begin to see, does Mahomes have the ability to rediscover that magic? Can they get over the psychological hurdle of what happened to them last February? So I have a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this Chiefs team, but the real test comes in January. As as it always does for this Chiefs team in the Mahomes era, the real test comes in January. And they've passed most of those tests in years past, but maybe it's going to look a little bit more difficult this time around.
Every year you lose another few pieces. Every year it's a little bit harder, just due to the way the NFL cap works. Every year we kind of hope to see the old Chiefs coming back. I don't think they're coming back, but I think you could see a more exciting version of this offense. Nowhere near, obviously, the kind of excitement that we saw early on in Mahomes' career, but we could see more production if their wide receiver core could just stay healthy and hopefully take some of the burden off of Travis Kelce, who, it's unlikely to return to where he was, but he's obviously still a very smart tight end who could be a good complementary piece rather than being the centerpiece of the offense. And then obviously you hope Pacheco can get back to himself, as you kind of said, Connor. I think the offensive line, this is a risk that they kind of felt like they had to make. In terms of choosing rid of Thuney, it was basically keep Thuney or keep Trey Smith, and they went with the younger player, even if Thuney's probably the better player right now. I can completely understand that decision, and it obviously makes a big decision. Obviously, they hope Sumataya can win that, Wasn't a very good left tackle. Hopefully he's a better left guard. And, with Jalen Moore and Josh Simmons, they obviously hope that one of those could turn into their left tackle. Obviously, they'll probably hope that Josh Simmons could be that guy, because obviously pick him in the first round, hope that this could be the left tackle of the future. You have that guy locked in for 4 years for a really cheap price. That'll make a lot of the other numbers a lot easier to move around. And if Jalen Moore doesn't win the left tackle job, he probably could compete with Jawan Taylor at the other side, to be frank, because he's fine, very much replacement level. But then you still have Creed Humphrey, who's probably the best centre in the league, and Trey Smith's an above average guard, if not good guard, depending on the season. And then, on the defense, you're still relying on Chris Jones. That's getting worrying now, because he is getting up there to have everything still basically roll around him.
You saw it in the Super Bowl. Like, I know he did that thing where he lined up sideways on the tush push and got his neck hurt, which was dumb as shit. But, like, he's getting up there in age. And I think the smart move for the Chiefs would have actually been to try and shift him this offseason.
Yeah, but when he's playing at the level that he did most of the season, it's really hard to do that. And obviously, I think Spags, with the kind of the dressing that Spags puts up in terms of some of the more aggressive stuff he does, though he has obviously toned that down a bit relative to his heyday of blitzing. I think you need to have someone who threatens all the time, where other defenses have to focus on. And I think Karlaftis is a good, second option, but he still isn't good enough to be like the focus like a Max Crosby or Myles Garrett, and Chris Jones isn't required for that. And the safety position is definitely a concern, but I think they have enough guys in there, both veteran. Most of them have experience and have played okay, that they can fill that in. So, I think it's just the Chiefs are the Chiefs. Like, they're going to get well into the playoffs. They'll almost certainly make the championship game, because that's just what they do. But a good season for the Chiefs is now measured of when you win the Super Bowl or not. And that's a really high bar to have to cross every single year. And I think right now, with this uncertainty, just with the way that they played last year, it feels like if a complete team comes against them, then, like the Eagles last year, that, the cracks that do exist in this roster, which just comes with being a veteran roster, can be exposed, and they can lose to that. And there's definitely a world where the offense finally comes back to being the great offense we remember from years ago, and Chris Jones has another great season, and the Spags continues to make defenses amazing no matter what. But right now, I'm feeling this will be a relatively down year. But for me, that means that they're basically going to be a complete pain in the ass. But they shouldn't be favourites to win the AFC necessarily. But they're still no more than the third most favourite team, but probably one or two.
Yeah, like I said, I think it depends on the line. But I still think the floor of this team is, barring obviously injury.
Given that we saw almost the worst case scenario last year, where the left tackle position was like Wanya Morris and Simataya, and both of them, and obviously you ended up with Tooney out there because it was so bad. Like, that's such an awful thing to happen, and you still manage to survive it. Like, it's hard to imagine that one of these guys, Simmons or Moore, can't be at least better than what you had last year.
Yeah.
Even if Tooney's gone, interior's a little bit worse. But if you have I think offensive line is mostly about. It's as much about your worst position as your best position. And I feel like even if the average is lower this year because you've lost an elite player in Dooney, if the floor is higher, then it probably won't make that much of a difference. It might be better, actually.
Yeah, so where do we have them going? I have 12-5 for the season, good for the second seed, and then they lose in the AFC Championship.
Yeah, 11-6 for me, number 2 seed out in the AFC Championship.
I'm a little bit more upbeat in the regular season, 14-3, which gives them the number 1 seed because of the Chiefs, and they will always have number 1 seed. But I see them going out the divisional to the Ravens.
Ooh, so, yeah. Now that's a bold call, on par with the Steelers not getting to 500.
Sean's an artist, and these projections are his his canvas.
Canvas, yeah, not template. Very good. Very good. Well,
it's still numbers, so it is still kind of templating, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's the AFC done then, lads. Very good. Any plans for the next week or two?
Not a huge amount. My wife Sarah's going back to work on the 14th, so this will be the last kind of week or so. She's around all day. So I imagine we might do 1 or 2 things, but nothing else. And also the fantasy draft.
Yeah, it's coming up
in Dublin. It should be a good crack seeing people.
Gonna do my bit of prep now over the next week or so and get stuff ready. Fitz has already got the large server farms running.
Running alternate universes to see which one is the best. Yeah.
Good old Vor never loses, except in terms of making the playoffs. Best average points per week, got that locked down. Actually making the playoffs, we'll see.
Yeah, this is we have a fantasy league that is essentially the chaos league. So what we do is it's a 16-man league. We draft it as early as possible. So in this case, like the first week of July or so, and yeah, it's nuts. We have it in divisions. We have it all structured so everyone, yeah, like you can end up like winning a lot and then not getting to the playoffs out of your division
Yeah.
and so on.
16-man league, full round robin, so everyone plays everyone else. All the division games are done at the end, and 3 rounds of playoffs. So week 18 is the final week, which I think for a fantasy purist is considered to be the greatest sin of all.
Oh, it is, yeah, because like yeah, you can have a team that is taking you all the way to a championship, and then they rest their starters on week 18 because it's irrelevant, and suddenly you don't have a team to play in the final. It's very messy, but it's very fun. Very good. Yeah, I don't think I'm heading down to Cork this weekend, and then I'll be up for the fantasy football then I think the week after. So that'll be good fun. Gonna try and get out playing a bit of golf. I finally got my handicap officially, so I'm now officially a golfer, I suppose. And yeah, that's kind of it for me. Nothing too wild or crazy. I'm currently myself and yourself running are arranging our travel bits for we're going to head over to the NFL game in Madrid, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, we didn't even want to see the Dublin game really. Madrid's where it's at.
Yeah.
Until we can't get tickets for that either. But anyway.
Yeah, but we've already booked the account, so we're going over anyway. But no, the that should be good fun. I think I haven't been to Madrid, so looking forward to getting a nice weekend out of that. That'll be good fun. So fingers crossed for us listeners. By the time you hear this, we either will or will not have been successful on the Ticketmaster Hunger Games, so that'll be fun. But yeah, so that'll wrap us up for this week. Next week we will be looking at the NFC East, so very exciting times. That'll always get big ratings, right? So that should be good.
On prime time.
That episode is very prime time. I suppose for now it's bye from myself, bye from Ronan,
Bye.
bye from Sean.
Bye.
This has been all 4 quarters. Thanks for listening, and we'll chat to you next week.